If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button as well as the bell to be notified of future videos. Thank you.
Hello Internet, welcome back here to the show, to a legacy conversation. I'm really glad to tell you we've got General Bornman with us. He ended his career as the officer commanding the General commanding the Special Forces Brigade. But he had a distinguished career. He went through a lot of things, held a lot of commander positions, as well as the staff courses, which I'm fascinated by. But for now, we're going to talk to him about something else. But let me first say to you, sir, welcome here. Thank you for taking the time.
Thank you.
We really appreciate it. In the previous episode, we started talking about a lot of general things. And then we mentioned that there's politics in the army, or perhaps, by this I don't mean the politics inside the army, I mean the politics from outside, from the politicians. I wonder if you can say us a few words about that, how the system works. Is it good? Is it bad?
This is a sensitive situation, but I'm going to be frank with you. Von Clausewitz said, war is an extension of politics. So this proves to us that the politicians play the major role. The Supreme Commander of our Defence Force during the National Defence Force and now with the present Defence Force, it's all the same. The State President is the Supreme Commander. Nobody else. He's in charge. He's number one. In all other countries, example, America, in Britain, well, they've got the Queen there with the Prime Minister, but I think the Queen, from a ceremonial point of view, is the Supreme Commander, Commander-in-Chief, but the Prime Minister gives the political and strategical objectives. I don't know whether, and I'm saying this with all due respect, whether the Queen whispers in his ear, do this or don't do this and do that. That's not for me to say. So politics play a very, very, very important role. And the politicians are in charge of a country. They make the policy, the laws, and we've got to execute the laws. There's also, of course, the Constitution, and I'm not going to get into the legal situation. And the Defence Force has got its own law governing the Defence Force, the Code of Military Discipline, the MDC, Military Code of Discipline. My first stance in the Defence Force was that Mr. Jim Foussier, who later became the State President, but that was a ceremonial State President, was the Supreme Commander. But we also had a Prime Minister. He was the Minister of Defence. We had the Prime Minister, and then we, in the olden days, we had the people in charge of the politicians, the Governor General, and later when we became a republic, it was the State President. I'm not going to name all the names. I'm just going to talk of the title. Now, every war, soldiers can't decide we're going to wage a war, we're going to attack this country, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. A further governing situation is the defense budget. The Minister of Defense has got to produce a budget every year, and the budget must be okayed by the Parliament. So it's not an easy thing just to milk money and to get money for certain objectives. Now, this allows the Defence Force for equipment, ships and aircraft and weapons and equipment and all this, also to pay the personnel. This is just the statutory situation. But in the years when after the military academy, I started realizing that politicians play a role. And I'm going to be very open with you. A very few of the politicians' sons went to the border. Here and there, some of them went. And that I asked a little question about this in myself. I couldn't voice my opinion. I was too junior, and even today, if I was still there and I voiced my opinion, there would have been repercussions. It's the way it works. That's it. And you always had the politicians interfering, because a mother in a certain town is not happy with her son there, then the MP, member of parliament, goes to the Minister of Defense, and you get a blunder from the Minister of Defense. We called it the ministerial inquiry. And then you had to answer to the minister. This took a lot of time because officer commandings, including me myself, was very cautious when you write all these reports. Your career was at stake for simple things. I'll tell you one thing that happened in the scene. We had an engineer section there, and they went to our Defence Force shop called Savi, and they bought beers, and they took it to one of the bases, and it was a authorized logistical run that they had to take beers for the troops there. And the lady in a liquor shop saw this truck with the beers there, and her mother was some other parliamentarian in the National Party, and she phoned her mother, and the next was my general telling me, why do I sell beers to the people in town? I said to him, that's utter nonsense. I investigated into this matter, and I gave you the facts and even sent some photos. But you know, of course, this took about 8 hours to unravel this whole situation, just to satisfy an old lady with the wet pants. This is the way I felt that day, and I still feel it today. Furthermore, especially in the Messina area, the politicians came and they hunted in that area. And this included the then Minister of Foreign Affairs, Botha, and Magnus Malan. And we had a fence there surrounding the whole Zimbabwe area from the bridge to the west and a part of the Botswana border to curb infiltrations from the ANC, to protect the farmers farming just south of that border. And they went and hunted at a certain farmer there, not a very positive man. He's in Australia today. And he talked a lot of nonsense. And the next day, we were told that we're not allowed to patrol on his farm. We're not allowed to fence on his farm, put the fence up on his farm, and this type of thing. I didn't take this for granted. I went to the security police. I said to them, this is the situation. Go on your security channels. And our then minister had to fly back and cancel this order. But another character on the Botswana border went to the then state president, F.W. de Klerk, and he didn't want this fence because it influences his hunting safaris. The game can't travel from Botswana into South Africa for him to make money. And we got an order from the state president, the commander-in-chief, not to fence that area. And the fence stopped at his eastern border, and it started at his western border. The farmers were up in arms. And I said to them, I can do nothing. My general got this order. I was a colonel then. I can do nothing about that. So obviously, I wasn't a very good National Party fair, just for this one thing. And the farmers, and this cost them votes in that area. At that stage, the Conservative Party was gaining a lot of ground in that area. So, but that wasn't my problem. I accepted it, and I managed the situation in that sense. In the operational area, we had the Kufut situation, and when I talk about 5-4 Battalion, I'll tell you much more in detail about Kufut, the operational wing of the South African Police. And they were very successful as well. And then they reported through the channels. Then Louis Legrandsie, their minister, jumps up in Parliament and he says, well, we got this and that success and this and this. The next time we get a blunder from our minister, what's wrong? Why didn't you do anything? Please explain, you know, this type of thing. It was a rivalry between the two ministers. They didn't see eye to eye. Today I can tell you this. And this had an influence on the ground. And this is where politics goes wrong. A comical incident, once while I was in 5-4 Battalion, the whole cabinet came and visited my base. They slept there for a night. And the General Malang was in his territory now, because it's now the army. And he started shouting at me and told me, run, come here. And I didn't take that for a good command. And I just positioned myself next to the then Prime Minister President P.W. Botha. And then he left me alone. I just shadowed him all the way. And he left me alone. But these are politicians, man. And visiting 3-2 Battalion, and you must ask guys that were there. In the evening, they drank too much. A certain clique of them, and really it wasn't. They used fire extinguishers and things like that. They behaved like hooligans. Some of us even wrote to our commanding officers that we don't like this type of thing. Well, obviously it just stopped there because careers were at stake. What's happening today? I can't vouch for how the politicians influence the situation. But in Special Forces, I had a very big problem. They wanted women to become operators in Special Forces. But when I speak about Special Forces, I'll discuss the situation. And I think we put that one in bed. But in conclusion, politicians were, in my eyes, and I'm talking about National Party politicians, they were a buggerance factor. They hindered us in our work. If there was something wrong, there were other channels to get rid of this. And normally your troops that are always causing problem, they speak to their member of parliament and via the channels that comes through to you. And it's time consuming and it's irritating. And that is not the way things should have been done. Just the last incident, in the first term of P.W. Botha's term as Minister of Defense, and he was a very good Minister of Defense. There was a guy from the United Party called Vos Raw. Now, Mr. Vos Raw was in the Second World War. He was a staff sergeant in the logistics. And he really took P.W. Botha on. There was once a complaint that in wintertime, the troops are cold when they do guard duty. And they both were equipped with coats, and they went to certain guard positions in the cold winter in Bloemfontein. And Vos Raw said, Pete Botha, just look here. It's cold. You can't do this. We rather want that. And there he helped troops because old Vos was a troop. But he didn't give us problems. Please, I'm frank, I'm open, and this is the way I really feel about this. You get an order, and then due to political reasons, you are stopped to do this to your utmost. course, well, I can say this as a retired officer today, and the National Party is gone long ago, and all the other people, unfortunately, are not with us anymore. But this is the way I felt as a commander, and this is what happened. And really, we didn't have a lot of time for these MPs. One night, we had a function in my area where Mabukwe is today. And a few of these MPs got drunk, and they started getting obnoxious. And I was on the verge to take this guy and to put him in bed. Luckily, a more senior MP got there, and he saw this cabal, and he took the guy away. No, he started assaulting us about things. As a matter of principle, I don't like politicians. So people must take it or they must leave it.
This is fascinating to me, sir. This is fascinating. I need to ask your opinion on certain things. And if you cannot answer me or will not answer me, that's fine. It's not a problem. The Israeli army, or let's call it the defense forces, they're really good. Really good in their own theater. And I suppose we are all supporters of them as well. But they do have a strange thing going on. They now tend to criticize each other in paper. So you will have a retired general, famous generals, I'm not going to mention name, but I know them all. And they would then not be happy with something which happened with a standing army. And they would go online, or they would go onto the newspapers, and they would become critical like you can't believe. How do you feel about that thing, sir? Do you feel that the old soldiers should just fade away? Or do you still have a duty to get involved if you really feel something's wrong?
Of course, I feel strong about this. We're in a democracy. It's part of being a democratical person. And if they can't take it, they must go. After I left the Defense Force, I wrote something in a paper in the Bild, and about the discipline of this new army. But did I get a lot of flack? But it came from my heart, and it was heartsore to see a general sitting at a car wash, drinking beer, 10 o'clock in the morning, and of the 6-pack, 3 was already gone. He wasn't at his office in uniform. And if you talk about that, you get, well, they couldn't do anything to me. It's the truth. And I feel it's democracy. And I fully agree with that, Jason. One prerequisite for things like this is you must have your facts correct. And not try and get old scores back and try and confront people you don't like. One mustn't do that. But if something is wrong, it's wrong. We've asked the present government, we are willing, without pay, to help certain things. And yesterday, when we spoke about the military academy, and I'm going to do business about that. Don't speak to those young officers, but they're afraid that we're going to talk politics. I don't talk party politics with anybody. It's beneath my standard. But they're not interested in getting the expertise of the older people. It's a political thing. And I mean, we were enemies, and the South African Defence Force never fought openly. There are a few instances against the ANC, against Inter-ministerial Rivalry. They didn't wage a war against us. It was the police against them, and we supported the police in certain actions. It's not like us in SWAPO. And I'm telling you, our relationship with SWAPO today is very good. I've spoken to a lot of ex-SWAPO guys already, and the one guy was a corporal with us in Joba, Karl in Joba. He became a general there because he was staff qualified. Unfortunately, he died of cancer. But Karl and I were in 2 contacts. We were together while he was still with the Wambo battalion. And I met his father. Later, I'll tell you a few stories about his father. He was the the chief of the Ovambo political party inland. But it's their prerogative. If they want it, we will do it. I'm not going to talk politics. I'm not going to politically influence these guys. But again, it's politicians. And I told you, a politician is a guy who tells lies and kisses babies. And that is what was said about Jimmy Carter. It's not I'm saying this, but that's the situation.
It was this George M. James fellow, our sponsor, who in all his books, all 51 of them, wrote that politicians float in what they talk. And some people
Obvious.
found that way. I must ask you, who signs your commission as an officer?
The state president.
So that comes back to him being in charge. He's the man. If you were in the UK, you could probably Royal Highness the Queen.
Yeah, no, the state president signs them. In my time, Jim Fouché was then the state president. He signed it. My deed of commission.
So now I need to ask you, sir, who advised the president on military matters?
The Minister of Defense.
And who advised him?
First, he's got the general staff to advise him. And he can co-opt anybody in the defense force on a certain matter. You can tell him, listen, come here, what's your opinion on this? What do you know? He knows if he earns his oaths and his stripes, he will know which horse will be for this course. But normally it's the chief of the defense force. If it's an Air Force matter, you'll get the chief of the defense force as well as chief of the Air Force included, and then treasury when it comes to money matters and this type of thing. This is the way it should be.
But things don't just happen in the army. I know that we are now somehow involved in the problems in northern Mozambique. And how would this come about? How would the orders come to you as the officer commanding of special forces to deploy?
Okay, Koos, first of all, the chain of command with operations, and I'm talking about special forces, and that applies for peacekeeping forces and all this type of thing. When it's internal, inside South Africa, within our borders, the Minister of Defense can sign an order. When it's external, the state president must sign this order. What happens, you get an order to do something internally. Then you draw up your plan and your orders as well with in a very short brief. And that then goes through the channels, chief of the defense force, and if it's the minister, he can okay it. Obviously, the minister must inform the state president then about this, but he's got the authority to do that. But when it's an external operation, the same procedure, and that authority is taken by the Minister of Defense to the state president, because this now involves international repercussions. And that's why, if the Honorable F.W. de Klerk said for certain things that he didn't know that, I don't believe him. He knew because he had to give the authority. But this again is I'm not trying and bully him while he's now old and ill, but this is the way it works, and this is the way the cookie crumbles. And
Yes.
This is the way it works till today.
I recall an incident with special forces in Umtata. And this was just before Mr. Mandela took over. There was a raid. And they did very well. If you think that on an average, sometimes when the Navy SEALs go in, they fire about 57,000 shots. Not joking. It was a bullet holes counted and so forth somewhere in Yemen. They even lost a damn aircraft because they couldn't land in dust. And this Special Forces group of South Africa went into Mthatha and people were killed. But I worked out they fired on average each of them about 6 or 7 shots. So it was aimed. Now, I don't want to go into the operation. It is in one of George and James's books. And then this fellow, the president of that time, and it's me saying it, you want to sue me, come to me. I'm waiting. He started trying to get out of it, and he gave a very legal reply. And it came down to just not accepting responsibility, in my eyes. I must stress this again, this is me talking, not you. It's not General Bornman, this is me. And so I read it, and I read also the TRC commissions and things on it, the reports, and I read our reports, and I really felt a leader, right or wrong, should stand up and take responsibility. And that is probably what Hitler and those people didn't do. By taking the easy way out of committing suicide, it's not the thing which a leader should do. So now I need to ask you, sir, would you agree in principle to me that a leader is responsible? Once that president signed that order, once that minister signed that order, and it goes to the army, and it goes to the commanding officers like yourself, something is going to happen. And he's responsible for that something. Or am I wrong?
No, you are 100% correct. That was the internal operation, and the Minister of Defense, and I think the Minister of Police informed the state president. I know about the situation, and I can get out of this one. It was before my time. In the military, we call it BMT, before my time. But I know everything about this operation. There were many things, but you see, politicians, and I must come up for them, they need votes. And at that stage, the political situation was very difficult in South Africa. But I mean, as an officer commanding, if something goes wrong in my unit, I'm responsible. I kept responsible. My head is on the block. Either I get court-martialed, or I get prosecuted, or I get transferred, or I get chased out of the defense force. This is what happens to us. I think this is a world phenomenon. No president will accept the blame if something goes wrong. And we call it fog of war. It's a mystery situation. These things happen, of course. These things happen. Mishaps happen. Remember, we're in a war situation, and we must take responsibility.
But now I need to ask you something, sir. The West Point people are very well known. The cadets there for their free answers. Yes, sir, no excuse, sir. Which obviously is damn nonsense, because life is more complex than that, I would say.
Oh, yes.
And I do know about the US general, it's actually a good one. McChrystal, I believe Stanley McChrystal, and he somehow insulted Joe Biden when he was still vice president. He said something like, "Bite me." And then they come down on me, and he did retire, the honorable thing in his eyes. And he was a good general, he was a good commander. And he just sort of resigned, went through the open door policies, became a very rich man, I suppose, as a director at one of the major defense companies. Now, when you say to me, as the commanding officer, that the box stops with you, it's your head on the that does not mean necessarily to go and plead guilty on something you're not guilty of.
Of course. No, that's it. That was the problem with Hitler. That's one of the reasons he will go down as a coward in history. I told you on a previous episode that he shot about 36 of his generals. And what was the complication of that? They followed the orders to the T, and in war, you can't predict everything. You've got to adjust certain things and handle the battle as it goes on. And if he wasn't happy with that, and he said you must go to the eastern flank, and you said the eastern flank was blocked, you went around it on the western flank, and he shoots you. What happens to generals on the ground? They lose troops. They've got no initiative. And I mean, if I do something wrong, I get shot. Not by the enemy, but by my own people. No, this is where leadership comes in from a state president. Obama did well. I saw some clips where certain of the, it was Navy SEALs or Delta Force operations to release hostages. He was in the ops room with the generals listening to the radio stories and having footage on this whole operation, sitting there as president. Now, to me, that's where in not all operations, I mean, there are various operations, but that is what I call a good commander-in-chief.
I have an interesting thing here. I recall my late wife once throwing a book at me, very, very thin book, and it was written by Lieutenant General Lawrence of the US Air Force, retired. And what he basically said was, and it struck me, is he said, if I say no, the matter stops. I have no further problems in life. If I say yes, well, then my problems start, because now something must happen. And it struck me that how often is it that we say no, and it does not stop there, and it just carries on and carries on. And I'm saying this perhaps not in a military sense, but in general life. How many times is it that we say to a child, stop, and he carries on, and then it becomes a problem?
Yeah, no, that is true. But if you say no to a certain situation, you must motivate it, and especially in the military sense. If your troops come with a request, I'm talking about in battle, sir, can't we try this and this? You say no because this and this and this. There must be a reason. Don't just tell them no. Do as I tell you. If you don't do this, I'm going to do that and that and that. And if you say yes, we can try it, but look at, and this is where experience comes in. Yes, we can do this, but look at the disadvantages, look at the advantages. What's your opinion now? I'm not saying that commanding and giving orders becomes a tennis match, one ball to another ball, and so we carry on till somebody drops the ball. But there must be a reason. Don't just say no, carry on. And the same applies with your children. If they ask you, Dad, can I go out tonight? You tell them no, because I'm worried about where you're going, and I don't have money. And please, you haven't got a driver's license to take my car. I think that's ample to tell the guy. And well, I had 3 daughters, and they pinched my car, but there were repercussions. But in any case, and that's also the other side. If they do something wrong, they must understand there's going to be repercussions. But no, it's in the military sense, that's very, very true.
So a commander should be flexible, sir.
Of course, he must be flexible. Within his sphere, we always say we all have chains. As a lieutenant, you've got a small little chain like this. In that scope, you can operate. A major's got a longer chain, and a general's got another chain. But remember, he's also tied up. He can operate in a broader sense, but he can't do everything as he wants. He's not El Supremo. He is definitely not that. That applies for the state president as well. He's also connected to a chain, a much longer chain than we've got. But I don't want to pull that chain.
I want to ask you, I'm going to give you 2 words, and I would like to hear your opinion on it, sir. As a military man, as a senior commander, body count.
Yeah, of course, this is a difficult one. Wars, and especially in retrospect, people are inclined to get body count and to say, but you lost so many bodies and I only lost two men. It's not the score like in rugby, baseball, or whatever the case might be. It depends on, in a battle situation, how you neutralize that enemy not to carry on. I'm being a very frank here. The Kufu people got a body count bonus for each body that they shot. That team got a bonus. Came out of the police budget. We didn't have that, but some people always liked it and said you must get as much bodies as you get. But that is not that's not the aim of the exercise. You must neutralize the enemy so that he cannot carry on what he is doing within the limits that's allowed to you and without restrictions in a certain situation.
So as a soldier, you are ruled by the rules of war. Those are your restrictions. Or are you allowed to go outside?
Well, it depends
Because
on
this is all part of politics, sir. Please forgive me. I know I'm asking very hard questions.
It all depends on your brief that you get and the orders that you get. That explains the way you can go and what you can do. It explains everything to you. And should you encounter a problem, to step out of those lines, you must contact your higher commander and say, listen, this is the situation. Can I do this, and can I go so? Can I get a little bit further, then I can get this result. Just keep your commander in the picture. But we are all limited. I mean, I couldn't take my battalion and go to Luanda and try and fight there. I had restrictions. There were certain logistical restrictions and obviously political restrictions. You must adhere to that.
Yeah, we're talking about the political influence because we have established the politicians are ultimately in charge, whether they like it or not, because that's where the orders come from. Now, would you say that these politicians had an obsession with a body count?
I already gave you the example of Louis Lefrancie and Magnus Malang in Parliament. That is wrong, and the reason for the body count in Parliament is to get sympathy for the war effort, to show that we are winning. There are a lot of things that I will not speak on that because that orders came from politicians that were not kosher, really, to gain the sympathy of the public and to gain votes. One must distinguish between these things. Please, I don't want to go into detail here.
Yeah, no, that's no problem. That's no problem. We had nuclear weapons at one stage. Was there like a command line in how to release these weapons? Because I do understand that at some stage the Cubans had 50,000 troops in South Angola, and they were making threats to come down south. And I know that a lot of things happened, and this is perhaps not part of the politics, but in a way it is. And I know that threats were made to nuke them if they come over that border. I don't know how serious this was. I really don't know.
Look, it's not like you see in the movies with the atom bomb and the briefcase. If you open it, there's a button that a certain person must press and put in a code and this type of thing. No. Artillery pieces could be fitted with nuclear heads. And the 120mm mortars also could have been fitted with nuclear heads. But that order should come from, because there's a very big political implication, should come from the highest authority, meaning the state president. I was never involved in a situation like this, where we ask for nuclear or even biological and chemical weapons. I think it's in the same campus as nuclear. But that wasn't asked. I don't know about Air Force, whether they had certain armament that could drop a bomb like in Hiroshima, because that had political repercussions. Let's take a scenario. We take a aircraft and we bomb Luanda, just as an example. The whole world will be against South Africa. I think how did John Foster say, it's too ghastly to contemplate. I don't think we could go there. And tactical nuclear weapons, no, we never asked for it. It was never enforced on us. But at the higher level, being delivered by Air Force or naval gunfire or artillery pieces at a very, very high level, it never happened. And I'm thankful for that. Because nuclear will cause a chain reaction that's going to be to the detriment of the country.
That fence which you were talking about between Zimbabwe and South Africa, I think it was electrified.
Yes. Yes, it was electrified. But later, on our own initiative, we tuned it down. The amps on that was very high, and that electrocuted people should they come over. And we didn't want to do that. But it gave us early warning. It's like an alarm system at large, and every 10 kilometers there was a substation with mobility that could go there and stop. And we rather did that because those people were not ANCs. They came across in another way. It was refugees, and I call them economical refugees. No, we detuned this, but we had an ops room in Messina that showed us whenever a gate is opened or whether a wire was disconnected or whatever the case might be, and we had a reaction force that went there immediately. And this is why we curbed it. There were people killed, yes, but it was an initiative from my side. I said no, let's rather detune this before we get international problems, and it's not human course. Those people are forced out of Zimbabwe due to economical reasons. There are various reasons. They seek another life here, and no, that there I'm very soft on that. That is most definitely so, and that's what we did.
It's always a difficult subject to speak about politics and the army because we're treading on very, very thin ice, of course, with important people. But as an officer, were you ever thinking that there should be a political solution rather than a military one before the changes of 1994?
Oh, yes. We've got a saying that the soldiers fight, but they're the first to enforce the peace. And I had this during 92. No, I'm wrong. It was in 1988. I was a task force commander in the Western region based at Ruakana. That's west of Oshakati, obviously on the Angolan border where the big Kaluek Dam is and all this. And we started with the monitoring of the Papla people on the Angolan side and us on the southern side, and of course the old Cubans in between. And, we could speak to the Fapla guys and to the Cubans, and we were the first to make the peace, the soldiers at each other. A political situation is always better and to talk. Well, somebody's got to win. And in Namibia, somebody won. Luckily, our political talks were there, and we didn't wage a war. Okay, there were sabotage and all these things in South Africa by the ANC in Cornelius, and a few incursions. And as an ex-policeman, what happened there. But we didn't wage a full-time war against each other. And there's an example of where it worked. And it worked in Namibia. Namibia is a good country today. They have their problems, economical problems as well. And you come from that soil. No, it is rather speak the Zimbabwean situation. How many lives were lost on either side, on the Rhodesian side and on the other side of Zana, Zipra, and in Zapu? No. In retrospect, we can say this. As soldiers, we wanted the war to go on, but just think a little bit ahead. The political situation is better. And let the masses decide. What happened in Afghanistan? The Russians were there first, then the Americans, the Brits, everybody, the French even was there. And they tried to uphold this situation. And what happened on a democratic basis, but not a real democratic basis? The Taliban took over. And I don't know whether there's peace there, but there's no hostilities, no more bombings. Yeah, you find these things, the aftermath of this type of solution. You will always have a few shots still being fired. But you think of all the lives today. I agree, rather a political solution. But our politicians, I don't know, they were not really up to standard to do this type of thing. Later, they decided to do the situation right, but it's also powers from external powers and powers from inside that force you rather to speak to shoot.
Would you say, as an old soldier, when you meet your former enemy, that it's still an animosity going on, or people just shaking hands and let it go?
No, of course, there's not animosities anymore. I'll tell you a story in this regard. While I was at Messina, the previous year, an incursion of MK came through, and they were caught by the security police, and the scuffle that was there. I'm not going into detail. And the one guy was shot, and the other guy was captured, and he later shot two policemen in the scuffle and all this type of things. He was then arrested, trialed, sentenced to death, and he was on death row. And when President Mandela took over, he pardoned him. And in this period of pardoning, the ANC then in Messina came with a story. They want to welcome these two war heroes back in Messina to the community in that area. And the police and myself got the ANC guys together and said, listen, we cannot control the whites. They've lost people, there's emotions. We can't control that. These guys to come in, look at the consequences. Please look at the consequences. You want to score brownie points for the election, but we'll do our best, but we cannot guarantee that we can control the situation. I mean, a guy can drive past and shoot somebody and things like that. And the one guy's name was Tete Ngube. The day I walked into Special Forces to take over command, who was there? Tete Ngube. He was one of my majors then. And Tete and myself got together. We discussed things, and he later was promoted to lieutenant colonel, but he left the defense force. He worked for some other housing scheme. But he had an open door to me, and I spoke to the guy, and he knew that I came from Messina, and we recalled that whole situation. He gave me the whole scenario from his side, and I said to him, Tete, if I was in your shoes, I would have done the same. And I don't want to say we're friends, we drink coffee together and all these things. Well, I don't know where he is in Johannesburg. I met him once. And even the guys in the military that we knew, and with the situation of organizing the incorporation of all these forces. No, things went well. There were problems. There were problems. And, I mean, it's two different situations, but there's not animosity and fighting and shooting and this sort of thing. Well, most of us left. Most of us in that hierarchy left. So, I mean, the guys now there have been together with these guys for 20 years now. So things are going as it's going.
General, I have to ask you a difficult question. Obviously, when you've been in the army as long as you've been, all of you know each other. There's a certain elite group, general officers, senior officers, you know each other. And you probably know each other's families as well. In certain ways, you can be considered friends. Now, for those who were forgotten, the 90s was a strange period in South Africa's time. The late 90s, after Mr. Mandela took over, was a time of great hope, I think, for a lot of people. But before that, between the time when he was released from jail to the time when he became president, this country could have gone anyway. It could have gone in a civil war. It was very close. And then suddenly the one person which everybody admired, even me in the police, was General Constant Viljoen. And we spoke about him before, a fantastic commander, fantastic human being. And suddenly he became a political leader. Now I have to ask you, sir, how did you feel as a serving officer when you saw a man like that see it as his duty to become a politician?
Of course, I think this is rather a very easy question to answer. General Viljoen, and he's deceased now, wasn't a good politician because he was too honest. He was too honest. He didn't fit in the realm of a politician. And I'm not saying that all politicians are dishonest and they kiss babies and tell lies. That's not my stance in this regard. He started with the Freedom Front, and he was ousted by the two Mulder brothers. And he left politics, and he died in peace on his farm. And that's one reason. He was in Parliament. He really did a few speeches, and he was good. He had the intellect and he had the knowledge, but he was too honest, too much of a straight man. We are soldiers, don't make good politicians. Some of my colleagues became members on the municipal level and so on, but they faded away. Some are still there, and they're doing well. But it's not this situation like Eisenhower being the Allied commander, going back, fighting a campaign, and become the president of America. That happens in African countries. It's rather the rule than the exception. But really, that and I'm saying this to the benefit of General Viljoen. I personally was actually glad when he left the political scene, because they'll get a good man, they'll bring him down. Politics is very cruel. Being a politician you've got to have a thick skin, and it's a cruel game. I might not like them, but I will not become a politician. But I feel sorry for them because it's a cruel game. And I think some of our members in the ANC, and especially the economical freedom fighters cadres, they realize it's a cruel game. Man eats man, and you get heckled in parliament and things like that, and that's not for an officer. Sorry. I hope I answered your question.
Yes,
But I was
indeed.
glad the day when he left the political scene. I was glad the day.
Indeed, you're right, sir, because I recall when that invasion of Bophuthatswana took place, or somewhere, perhaps not there, but at the
In Mabata.
Kodesa or someplace, and they broke into this bunch of fox and tox. I don't even want to say it. You know, my English accent isn't that good, but it's not the word you people think. I mean, a bunch of crooks. And I remember him looking like he always did, you know, like an officer, almost pleading to these people to stop their nonsense and just to go away. And I thought to myself, this is actually contaminating a good man. But it's a personal opinion. I hope I'm not out of line when I say that. We've been speaking now almost an hour again on the politics, and I must tell you, it was probably one of the best episodes and also one of the hardest. And I must thank you, sir, for...
When I speak about special forces, I'll touch on the Mabatu situation. General Viljoen, my one unit commander was there. And what actually happened there?
I've heard the rumors, I've heard from special forces themselves that something happened there. I would love to know if it's possible. But I think for now, let us leave the politics alone. I feel dirty myself now. Or I'll go and take a shower.
Let's wish them luck, and may they survive.
Yes, we wish them all the best in the world. We'll even pray for them, and we ask everybody listening here, let's pray for them. I'm sure they start off good.
I do that on a daily basis.
We will have to make an episode also about religions, the role of God playing in the life of a soldier. That would be fascinating as well.
We can.
Well, we came to an end of another episode. I'm sure I said that this was a hard one. If there's anyone to blame, blame me. I'm the one who asked the questions, and therefore I take the responsibility. Thank you, sir. I'm most grateful to you. And until we meet again, God bless.
Thank you. The same to you, Koos. It was entertaining. Brought back memories as well. Thank you very much, and keep well.